Before we get into the story of it, if you're unfamiliar with the general idea behind the Adaptertrix, it's a version of the omnitrix that alters the DNA of an alien in between transformations, making them better suited to the situation or enemies they come up against. With fan-made omnitrixes in general, I see a few paths you can follow, original characters or some simple variant of Ben. For the story of the Adaptertrix, I picture a version of Ben in the same vein as Mad Ben, Benzara, or Ben 23. Rather than the Omnitrix, which was created in order to give species a better understanding of one another, it was instead created by Azimuth as a way to see how far you could push the evolution of a species. Not through a process like a million-year war simulation like with the omnitrix, but from real-world experience. With the added benefit of giving Azimuth an ally who's always able to adapt to any situation perfectly given they survived the situation in the first place. This story would play out in a similar way initially. After accidentally burning down the forest as Heat Blast, the Adaptertrix would rework Heat Blast DNA to give him a greater control over fire, now being able to absorb flames as well as create them. Coming in quite handy the next time we see Heat Blast in the following episode, Washington BC, where this version of Ben would simply absorb the flames out of the burning building before entering. Skipping ahead in the story, by the time this version of Ben reaches Omniverse, you have a version of Heat Blast with a whole new look, now with a complete control over flames at a huge radius, now the ability to focus his flames straight off that larger output for a more condensed superheated shot. Like I touched on with the original Adaptertrix video, each of Ben's aliens slowly becomes more and more powerful, some becoming very visually distinct from their species counterpart. A few more classic series examples: after Ripjaw's run-in with a Kraken, you immediately 1. Have a version of Ripjaws that can now breathe on land, and 2. A Ripjaws that grew in size resembling something of a lake monster himself. After the initial run-in with Dr. Animo, Ditto's body would now adapt to be less easily hurt, functioning in a similar way to like a Logia fruit from One Piece, being made up of a liquid that's pretty much immune to blunt force hits, able to move around in a similar way to Goop. Back to the story itself though. The events of Classic would mostly play out the same, particularly the events of Season 1, with a few small adaptations here and there, sort of helping Ben out as you go. Starting to change a little bit once you start getting into events like Kevin's return to Framed. In this timeline, Kevin's absorbed the DNA of Ben's aliens along with the Adaptertrix's innate ability to rework that DNA as you go. You have this version of Kevin who's less adapted and severely outclassed by Ben's version of each transformation. I'd say Ben probably beats Kevin much faster this time around, resulting in an amalgam version of Kevin who from this point can adapt. We get to see the events of Grudge Match with Kevin's return. The same fights take place, but this time Kevin's skin's a bit more of a tough hide, now able to resist blasts like what he was hit with in Framed. Starting off that episode, Kevin will be fighting against Diamond Head, who's adapted multiple times at this point, still outclassing Kevin slightly. This is where the power creep starts to come in. The following encounters with villains become easier. The next challenge comes with Dr. Animo and the Mutant Ray, the animal hybrids now being more powerful, already adapted versions of Ben's aliens. The next key moment in the series would be when Ben's confronted by Vilgax and a now vastly adapted version of Kevin, confronting Ben before the two see a flash of purple light, not green light in this version, as out of the water emerges a version of Diamond Head comparable in size to a small Toku star. At this point, fighting villains is mostly a steamroll for Ben. As this version of Ben gets new aliens, he just becomes more arrogant, not seeing the species for what they are, but more excited about what they'll become. At this point in the narrative, this is where Future Gwen comes in and takes Ben and Gwen to the future timeline in order to help Ben reconnect with his humanity. In the future, we see this version of Ben 10,000 patrolling a near crimeless Earth, with most villains being too emotionally and mentally defeated to even bother at this point. Each of Ben's alien forms are so far beyond most species that it's not even worth trying. Ben 10,000 not seeing the need to return to his human form at all when you can master control your way through endless hyper-evolved aliens, each tailor adapted to the situations you already know they'll do well in. These two versions of Ben see their faults in one another. Our Prime Ben returning to his timeline with a less obsessive outlook on the device. Now for the events of Alien Force. After being off this version of Ben's wrist for so long, the Adaptertrix recalibrates, giving us the Alien Force playlist. Kevin joins the team just like an Alien Force, but let's say Quarrel taught this version of Kevin to channel that adaptation to an extent. So he's able to, in a similar way to Kevin 11,000, access alien abilities in his human form, being an adapted human. Now being a major factor in fights, well beyond what we would have seen from Kevin otherwise. Creating a bit of a dynamic of this new, stronger Kevin sort of showing up this Ben who's got a new roster of aliens, taking Ben a little bit longer to sort of catch up with him again, kind of really jumping back into the rivalry we had in Classic, but with a more on the same team outlook. Obviously the hybrid is still an issue, you can't really out-adapt a story arc, it's just that over time Ben's aliens would be better able to deal with these hybrid. The next major issue Ben would run into would be with Albedo. Now with a version of the Adaptertrix that tries to simulate the encounter it's about to enter 10,000 times, and adapts the alien that many times in response, making them a near-perfect answer for any situation. And that's where I'll leave it for now. Maybe I'll do a follow-up for Omniverse. If you have any suggestions on where this story should go, or any opinions on how transformations should go, or you want to submit any art, I've loved the feedback from the previous Adaptertrix video, and I've been very keen to make this video for quite some time. Thanks for watching.